So, for this edition of Now Age Conversations, I'm here with Reverend Billy Talen. Hey, Billy.
Hello, Craig.
Hey, good to be seeing you. I've been following you for quite a while, and I learned the concept of change Alleluia from you, and it's a powerful one. For people who don't know about you, and God forbid they don't know, but maybe we could give them a little background on the Reverend Billy, the Church of Stop Shopping, to bring people up to speed on what you do, what the mission is, a little bit about the projects that you guys have taken on.
The Church of Stop Shopping is a community of activists. The heart of our activity is singing when we're not in jail. We believe in what we call nonviolent dramatic action, and we do that a lot together. And about half of the choir, 35 Voices, has been in the Tombs here in New York City, where we are based. We are a 15-year-old project now. Some of us have been here since the beginning. My partner and I, Savitri D, and myself are the putative spiritual leaders of a quote-unquote church that is populated with people that are in recovery from fundamentalism. It's because the basis of our activist work is that we resist the monoculture in whatever form it arrives. And for a lot of us, the first form was the fundamentalism of our parents' and grandparents' religions. But now we have people it's an immigrant city here, of course. We have people in recovery from Hinduism, Buddhism. We got the Jews, the Baptists, the Catholics. And I perform this kind of resistant satire of the people that raised me, the right-wing apocalyptic Christians of the Dutch Calvinist religion of Holland, Michigan. That's my particular backgrounds. So I'm dressed up in white polyesters with a Elvis hair, and I'm a shouting preacher. I love to preach. I'm lucky that I found a way to preach since since I'm not a Christian. But we have out of the starting gate 15 years ago, our activity was the early resistance, I would say, to gentrification, especially to super malls. A lot of activist communities around North America invited us to do some gospel high-stepping down their Main Street, supporting local people in their fight to save themselves from Walmart or from a big super mall. We're against consumerism, so we're against the culture and economy of mainstream America. And we usually have a campaign in the foreground that expresses that consumerism in some way. Around Christmas time, we have our purest expression of anti-consumerism, because the commercial Christmas is the purest form of our devil. But throughout the year, we've helped people in Appalachia resist big coal and mountaintop removal. We've done a lot of anti-sweatshop activity, of course, helping people invade their local Disney stores and their local Gap stores. We've struggled against Starbucks, representing coffee workers, the baristas inside the coffee shop, as well as the people on the other end of the supply chain, the coffee farmers in Guatemala and Ethiopia and so forth. So our campaign takes different. Right now, we're trying to clean up the parks and schools of this country which are sprayed heavily by Monsanto's Roundup and the toxin glyphosate. We've been doing that for the last couple years. Last year we opened for Neil Young. And my book, The Earth Wants You, from City Lights Press, which in which the Monsanto struggle is foregrounded in these recent efforts. We're mapping the parks and schools of North America. It's a big job, but we're forcing municipalities, parks departments, cough up the information about their spraying of the toxins, which has not slowed down despite the science. And so now we have 5 cities posted at revbilly.com. 5 cities and the California school system, the schoolyards spraying, is how far we've gotten. We think it's a 3 or 4 year project. We hope other people join us. I don't know if we can do it by ourselves. And so we sing and we input data from parks departments. Amen.
So what was it about the Monsanto? I mean, to you and I, Monsanto and Roundup, Glyphosate, it's all sort of second nature language. But still, and I'll just tell you the own experience I had in the past month, is that I started breaking out in horrible rashes around my eyes, right? I mean, and to the point, and I right away I think it's got to be something I've eaten. And it wasn't until I went to somebody who knows about allergies and sensitivities, and upon some testing figured out that it was a pesticide reaction. There had been obviously some pesticides being sprayed. Of course, when we say pesticides, most likely Roundup, because that's what seems to get sprayed like candy around here and around most places in America, and such causing my eyes to inflate like tomatoes that I found myself last week in the emergency room getting pumped up with some Benadryl and steroids, and never once thinking, oh wow, I wonder if it's all the pesticides that are getting sprayed here that are somehow wafting into my eyes.
We have national neuroses around guns and bullets. We also have a national neuroses around spraying with invisible, chemicals that we can't react against because they are invisible, unsmellable, untouchable. I don't know where this comes from. But you see the willingness to bomb, to drone, to spray. It's almost a sort of Freudian sperm spraying sickness that we have. Some sort of dousing sickness. We are amazed. I just mentioned that the municipalities are not slowing down the spraying and finding alternatives. It seems like every couple days there's a new study. With the last one was just came into our computers yesterday, linking glyphosates to rheumatoid arthritis. But birth defects, autism, endocrine system disruption, lymphoma. The list goes on and on. You've got the most prestigious doctors, researchers in the world, from the World Health Organization, telling you it's carcinogenic. At what point does the precautionary principle come into play? Well, let's not spray ourselves with this. It apparently, when we had our meeting recently with the New York City Parks Commissioner and his deputy and a kind of a circle of their bureaucrats, they were angry with us. They considered us quote unquote protesters who somehow got a meeting. What about just the facts on the ground? What about just protecting people from these poisons?
Yeah. So in New York City in particular, I know that you filed a Freedom of Information request, right, to find out exactly what.
We wanted to know all the spraying events, where, when, and what dosage for 2014 and 2015. In the 5 boroughs of New York City. And now we've got FOIAs currently on the desks of parks departments in 16 different cities as we expand our mapping.
And what you found out in New York was particularly shocking, just in the areas where it's being sprayed, as opposed to areas in parks where it's not being sprayed.
Yes, the wealthy parks in Manhattan, the famous ones, Central Park, Union Square, Washington Square Park, and so forth, they are sprayed very little, and they have wealthy people surrounding the parks who have organized into conservancies and alliances and business improvement districts. And they say, oh, you don't have to spray us. And then the Parks Department, which has been, it's like local neoliberalism. It's the budget is slashed by the same wealthy people that then inherit the parks that we, the public, can no longer take care of. So, but the upsetting thing is the racism. Out here in the boroughs, in the Bronx and Queens, Staten Island and Brooklyn, the spraying goes on because there's no wealthy people here to say, that's okay. We can afford gardeners. We can afford park workers with weed whackers, and we can take care of the weeds the old-fashioned way. We have to chemicalize. I say we because I'm sitting here in Brooklyn with the children from a schoolyard. Maybe you can hear them screaming in the backyard, in the background here. But we're 1 block away from Prospect Park, and we have, according to the map, significant spraying events right here in a playground we find ourselves with our 6-year-old daughter wondering how dangerous it is. So the disparity in spraying, based apparently on race and income level, is must be corrected. It's just unacceptable.
Yeah, and you talk about the neoliberal aspect of it. I mean, even the fact that it happens when people are under economic stress, the priorities that you have in life are shifted. So the priorities are getting food on the table, getting through a day, getting your bills paid, and then, concerning yourself with issues of pesticide spraying by City Parks Department becomes a luxury.
Yes, the difficulty in 2016 is just people are overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed by the as you mentioned, the necessities of just providing for themselves, but they're also overwhelmed right now by Orlando, overwhelmed by Donald Trump, or overwhelmed by the world. One of the reasons that after more famous campaigns that have taken the Stop Shopping Choir and Reverend Billy to 4 continents and some of the highfalutin things we've done, one of the reasons we're digging in and becoming hands-on involved with this local issue is we're fascinated with the idea of breaking through to people. We preach and sing on the sidewalks. We in subways. Before we met with the Parks Commissioner here in New York, we performed up in his offices. We, just forced ourselves past the rent-a-cops and the security people and just apologized to them and just kind of went up and sang in the hallways outside their offices and gave them information. We're trying to break through the walls of psychological resistance that people must have up around them, just because we're in this super consumer era. We're consuming so much. We're consuming psychologically so much. The mental environment makes it almost impossible to defend ourselves.
Yeah. And what you're talking about is really direct action. Can you hear me okay?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
What you're talking about is direct action. And direct action, as opposed for, going out and voting for a candidate. We're in election season right now. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But, I mean, most people think, okay, I do my duty. We vote here. We live in a democracy. That means that we have a right to vote. We vote for these people who do our bidding. But that, of course, is no longer enough. That we see now with the rise, and it wasn't until fairly recently that anybody ever understood what neoliberalism. We didn't even know that there was a term for the economic conditions that we're living under called neoliberalism. I mean, they did such a great job at cloaking that, but now we know what it is, and it's been named. The traditional levers of power, which are you work within the system, just don't seem to be effective at dealing with issues just like you're talking about. How do we deal with just keeping ourselves healthy and not being sprayed by some carcinogen or what's been labeled a carcinogen at maybe in California, places around the world, certainly maybe not in New York. And the only way to do that is to what you're doing, which is risking arrest, doing things that upset the authorities to get the attention that you need.
Well, the corporate intrusion into, everybody's got white wires in their ears and headphones and glowing screens in the palm of their hands now. And the corporate intrusion down into the intimate psychologies of people is so complete at this point that we believe in the politics of interruption, the politics of embarrassment, the politics of I'm in your face. I'm getting your attention now. I'm gonna stop the corporate flow. I'm your neighbor. Let's talk. It's like a latter-day enforcement of community based on Jane Jacobs, kind of mixed with Malcolm X.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about Orlando. And since that's fresh in our minds, my wife and I were at a prayer vigil last night at a local church, and it seems like that's what we do. These things happen, and we go to the local church, and and very eloquently and appropriately, the names of the victims are read aloud, and we feel what we feel for them. But this time, for me, I said, it's not enough. Something's missing. And what's missing to me is that this is just a microcosm of the larger disease, which is American militarism. That we are infected. We on a national level, we solve problems with violence. I mean, a couple of things that came up. I mean, Obama was just in Hiroshima, but it's like the Hiroshima thing is it's almost like a celebration of our greatness. The most horrific military act of all times about dropping atomic weapons on innocent people. But that makes us sort of tough Americans. We can't apologize for that. We look at drone wars. We look at the celebration of the killing of Bin Laden. The death penalty, and the desperation that's brought upon by these neoliberal policies, which when you see suicides in this country by middle-aged people, really becoming what's considered epidemic levels, and most of this is happening because of economic squeeze. When there's just no opportunity left for people. What's left then for people to say, hey, you know what? Violence is what goes. Our Second Amendment. The question is is what makes America exceptional? Our exceptional violent nature.
God, I hope not. That's a question, Craig, that is so sad that I'm left speechless by how you phrased the question. I hope there is something exceptional about our world here, but our cultural momentum has gone forward unchecked. We haven't had the moral leadership. We haven't had communities where the internal conversation is vivid enough. Communities have been splattered and dashed by economic pressure and cultural pressure. The mental environment of marketing is so virulent. The thousands of corporate messages that explode in our brains every day. It hasn't been tenable for a long time. To some of us, it seems absurd for a long time. And our moral guides, like Kurt Vonnegut, always traced this violent era to the end of the Good War. Of course, he was personally in Dresden in a meat locker underground and survived Dresden and then spent several days stacking German corpses with the German survivors throwing rocks at him. He was a 19-year-old kid. But Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the inability to forgive the civilian population at the end of World War II turned out to be a tremendous marker, an indicator of where we were headed in the next half century. And we just haven't had the peace movement, which, what is the peace movement now? It has to start over with Orlando. We have the War Resisters League here in New York, and these are elderly people. We remember acts of peace, like the Golden Rule, the sailboat that went out across the Pacific Ocean, captained by Quakers in the 50s, headed towards the Marshall Islands where they were testing nuclear bombs. They got as far as Hawaii. They were thrown in prison, but they became the inspiration for the Sea Shepherd and Greenpeace. A whole strain of peace work. Do we have that now? Who are our peace heroes now?
Well, Obama won the Nobel Peace Prize, didn't he?
I didn't hear that.
Obama won the Nobel Peace Prize, didn't he?
Yes, and he never stopped the drones. He never stopped the drones. His permanent kind of unacknowledged war just kept going all through his 8 years. He has no credibility to criticize violence at this point. He just doesn't. He adopted a drone program. And one by one, the survivors in the families of murdered people, they would come back to the United States, and people like Medea Benjamin at Code Pink and so forth would present these arguments to Congress. Here we had, a local town hall meeting, a wedding, here we had a family having a picnic. The presentations of the murders. And it just didn't have any play in our media. It just wasn't something that Americans had to deal with. We have to deal with Orlando. Here, being a New Yorker who was here at 9/11, it does feel like 9/11, except in addition to the religious fundamentalism, we have sexual fear. So it's not a time where a person like me has glib answers. We know that major vectors of American culture have been going in an extremely violent direction for a long time, unchecked, always making money. The outrageous apocalyptic video games, the advertising campaigns by corporations in public space, the taking over of parks, the taking over of public space, and the domination of the streets and sidewalks by corporations and the invasion of advertising there. All of corporate marketing is threatening. It threatens you with an inability to sustain health, sexiness, power, good looks, youth. There's always, we're bathed in threats all day long. This is not considered violent. This is called freedom of expression. And in the wake of Supreme Court decisions of late, it's protected as if the corporation's a person. So I'm simply hoping that a new generation we've seen the way that young people responded to our our child of Brooklyn, Bernie Sanders, and I'm just hoping that we have a new generation of young citizens who can critique this absurd culture that we've created, do something about it.
Yeah. One of the things that comes up for me is that, in the past, when we're thinking about new Supreme Court justices and senators think about, should there be a litmus test and on their positions on Roe versus Wade and what have you. I'm thinking that maybe a way to deal with this is that we, as citizens, we should have a litmus test for national politicians, and those things should be, climate change and also rejecting militarism. And I think that there's just got to be some sort of karmic connection to the fact that, you and I aren't personally, firing drone weapons, but we are part of a society that is somehow codependently enabling this, and we have to somehow put the brakes on it. And maybe one way to address these aberrant, shootings is a way to reject our greater militarism, on a global scale. And start to get vocal about that and demand that of our leaders. An article in today's New York Times talked about the differences in the way that Obama and a future Hillary Clinton presidency would deal with terrorism. And it was clear that she would be much more militant about the way she clearly, she's not shy about talking about her using the military to solve problems, But that's something that needs to be checked going forward. So I guess, in this choosing, we have options now. And it doesn't have to be a Democratic or Republican candidate. There are other people in this race. And there are people running, namely Jill Stein with the Green Party, who would have a litmus test that would be reining in a militarism that would be really full-throated supporting climate change and just economic justice as it needs to happen. Where do you come out now on the elections, and if Reverend Billy was going to be endorsing somebody, who would that be?
Well, I don't know what to do about commercial democracy. I started long ago going door to door for Eugene McCarthy back in the mid '60s when I was in high school, and just always had an eye for the George McGovern, the Jesse Jackson, the Shirley Chisholm, the whoever that Bernie Sanders was that year. The corporations expect to remain in power. They finance both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. I think that Bernie represents a close call for them. And like Occupy Wall Street, like Black Lives Matter, the Bernie Sanders movement is one that must continue. How that manifests, how we stay together, how we come back into our neighborhoods to create areas of education and influence is something I hope to participate in with the choir. Of course, we're in the heart of where he came from here in Brooklyn, and but I live in Windsor Terrace, Brooklyn, so I live in a divided neighborhood. My landlord downstairs, I don't know if they're listening to me right now, but they have a big old American flag out front that is sort of fading, and I've promised my landlord's family that I would help them put up a new flag. And one of my landlord's, a man who lives here, in fact, my landlord's younger brother has on his SUV, protect, don't protest. Protect, don't protest. And I know that I know that he's aware that Reverend Billy and his family live in his house on the second floor. We kind of the cognitive dissonance of our house is sort of explains our neighborhood. We have old Irish and Italian families here. Many of them are police people or have relatives that are police people. And we have teachers and garbage people. We have pensioners, a lot of pensioners here. So it's middle class that way. And so it's a little more stable. It's not gentrifying as fast as other neighborhoods because these old families are holding on to their homes. So that's great. But I have some neighbors who come over and talk to me and Savitri, my partner, on purpose. We are progressive people surrounded by American flags here. We don't have flags. If I had a flag, it would be the Earth flag. I don't know if I should just put it up right next to my downstairs neighbor's American flag. My book is called "The Earth Wants You." So with the famous recruiting poster from 100 years ago, when Uncle Sam points at you and says, "Uncle Sam wants you," adjusted so that the new patriotism is the Earth. That would be certainly. That would, if I had an Earth flag out there, that would represent our current values. So, I don't know if I answered your question, Craig.
Well,
we have a lot of work to do right in my neighborhood here. I knew that.
yeah, and just sort of to close on the reason that we spoke. Can you hear me? Okay.
It's coming and going. I'm trying to read your lips.
Okay. The reason I reached out to you was because of the New York Parks Department report that you got about the Roundup. So, what is it that individuals living in New York City who are concerned about this, what can they do to get involved?
We're just beginning to. We just got the response from 2015 on June 1st, and we just got it up. The map. The interactive map, where you hit the plus sign with your cursor, and you go down farther into the map, and you can see exactly where the spraying event that is closest to your home is. Hallelujah! And so we've just gotten that. So we are just finding out who is interested, and people are just starting to contact us. We have a group of 5 or 6 organizations that have a loose coalition, the Coalition Against Poison Parks. But we're just starting to receive from people their interest. I would appreciate it if people who are right now the cities that are posted, the mappings that are posted on revbilly.com are Seattle, Tacoma, Portland, San Francisco on the West Coast, and Philadelphia and New York on the East Coast. Our next city to come online will be Los Angeles, and then we're going to work on Atlanta.
So it's a national effort. This is not just restricted to New York City.
We have 3 part-time workers right now, and it's the first time that the Stop Shopping choir has had this approach to a campaign. We're usually invited into campaigns because we sing and preach and shake our booties. People need something for their march and rally, and we come in and we're of service that way. This is we're getting down into our own local. This is like the near space around us, finding the magic and finding the evil around us. In fact, inside of us, we're going to be tested now for glyphosates. The 35-voice choir will all send urine samples into the laboratory. The last testing of Americans had 93% of us with more than 3 parts per billion glyphosates in our bodies. So it's a new kind of politics. They all say all politics is local. This is all politics is not only local. All politics is your body. Very local. Amen. So that's what we're doing. We're going out from our bodies back out to North America and the world. Of course, the EU is ahead of us. The EU has just banned glyphosates, and 60 countries have banned glyphosate. So it really does relate to Orlando. It relates to the inability to stop bombing people. It's an American problem that we're facing.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to make sure I link to your site and to the relevant pieces so people can find out more and people can get involved and contact you if they wish. So thanks so much for your time, Billy. And
Frank, can you post a song from the choir?
Of course.
They're really wonderful and uplifting.
Of course.
Activists who sing together. There's nothing quite like it.
Of course. Yeah.
Thanks for having me today. Appreciate it.
And hopefully we'll do this again soon.
Earth Hallelujah, Craig.
Hallelujah. Later. Bye-bye.